Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. So, last time I said I was going to be watching Distress and a Sudden Visitor, or a Strange Visitor. I've seen so many different iterations of the title, I'll eventually get it right. I think it's Sudden Visitor actually. But last video I said I was going to watch that, and then I started the OVA and it turned out to be Elsie's Notebook, which was an amazing Attack on Titan OVA. Y'all have told me and warned me that it's very important to the plot. Yeah, I can see why. But these two OVAs that we're watching, I've come to find out that OVA 2 is Distress and OVA 3 is Sudden Visitor, or vice versa. I think maybe Sudden Visitor might be OVA 2. Either way, I'm hopefully on the right OVAs now. That's the point. So we're going to watch those next, and then we're going to round out with No Regrets. So that's fine. That's absolutely okay. I'm fine with that. It'll be nice to focus on Levi's story right before we dive into Season 2. Seems legit. But anyway, last OVA with Elsie's Notebook was really interesting. Very interesting. Lots of reveals and Titan lore about things involving the Titans. I'm pretty excited about it. But I've heard that these are kind of based on like Jean's backstory, and then one's like on the training corps when they were in the training regiment. I'm fine getting more focus on that because getting some focus on the characters, even if it's not 100% canon. It's back to the good old days, right? So I'm all about that. And plus, I don't know if y'all know this, but if there's not a president for the Jean fan club, I will take the seat because I think Jean might be one of my favorite characters in this series. So as soon as someone said it was a backstory on him, I was like, yes, we need more of that. The only thing I'm hesitant about is that Jean has developed so much over the course of this season that if we're going back to the beginnings with Jean, I'm a little worried that he might be like his kind of arrogant former I'm going to be in the military police self. But we may also see why Jean wanted to be in the military police. I know he gave us a reason back in episode 3, but I feel that there's more to it than that. So I'm very curious. Any information about Jean, I'll take, because he's one of my favorites. I think he's underappreciated, or y'all have told me he's underappreciated. There needs to be more Jean love in Attack on Titan. That's all I'm going to say. But in any case, I'm excited. We're watching 2 OVAs in this reaction. So there'll be a link down below where you can watch the OVA reaction in full. But with that being said, I'm ready to go. So let's do this, shall we? We are going to start the first OVA. It's 25 minutes, so it's a little bit longer than a regularly scheduled reaction. So what I'm probably going to do is start the reaction and watch the first OVA, and I'm going to take notes, like I do with Ace of the Diamond when I'm watching multiple episodes. Take notes, and then watch the Distress OVA, or whichever comes first of the two. And then at the very end, we'll talk about them both. So that way you can watch the whole reaction in full for both episodes. I am watching it on the Sketch of Sketch sites because, as I said during Elsie's Notebook, these aren't found anywhere legit. So I've got to scour the internet to the dark nether sphere of the scary sites where there's just porn everywhere. But I don't care because I want to watch the OVAs. So if you see it jump around a little bit, it's just me getting rid of like a pop-up. So hopefully that doesn't ruin the OVA experience. But let's do this, shall we? We are going to start this OVA here in 5, 4, 3, 2, and get rid of that pop-up. Again. And 1, and let's go. Wow, so these OVAs were outrageous. They were outrageous and ridiculous, and they really make me miss the simpler times of Attack on Titan, like the pre-Trost times. I thought the show was crazy when it first started, but, you know, after these OVAs, I'm like, man, those pre-Trost days, they were pretty simple, weren't they? And those pre-Stohess days, those pre-Expedition days, they were all so simple, weren't they? Two very different OVAs. There's parts in each that kind of connect to the rest of the season in interesting ways, and I know that they're not fully canon, but there are little parts that I'm like, that are kind of foreshadowy and kind of crazy when you think about them in context with the rest of the season that I want to talk about, because they're such interesting OVAs. Now I know the Jean one, I think the Jean one is technically canon. I think it was like an extra side story, but the Distress one is not. And I kind of get that because the Distress one makes a lot of callbacks to episodes 4 and 5. It's like episode 3.2 7.5, so it makes a lot of callbacks, so it makes sense it's not really a canon one. But I think the Jean one is canon, because there's a lot of new material. And it's ridiculous. Attack on Titan has the weirdest sense of humor. It's kind of the humor that I like. It's super dark humor, and it's like kind of awkward humor. But this series is so serious 90% of the time that I feel like we need that moment of levity. And Jean's A Sudden Visitor, that had so much levity in it. I was like, God, I needed these OVAs after the insanity that has been season 1 and after the insanity that's been Ilse's Notebook. I'm glad these 2 OVAs are there to give like some lightheartedness, because next is going to be No Regrets with Levi, and I have a feeling that that's going to tear my soul out. So this is like a nice little, before you get your soul stomped on again and get reminded why Attack on Titan is so serious, we're going to have these 2 OVAs that are really light and fun. And here's the thing that's so weird, and I did the same thing in Ilse's Notebook with Oro, but I should know that these characters are okay. They're going to be fine throughout this OVA because they're fine in the actual season, right? I should think that. And so going into these 2 OVAs, especially the second one, Distress, there shouldn't be any stakes or any feeling of stakes, because we all know those characters live to fight another day. But Attack on Titan, it has some kind of crazy way of just worming its way into your heart and your mind, to where as you're watching, you're like, gee, I hope they make it out okay, even though you know they're going to. Like the second OVA, I was like, why am I worried? But it creates such good tension that you kind of do get worried. So, man, I want to talk about Jean's OVA first, the sudden visitor being his mom. Oh my gosh. There's so much with this. I forget that way back in episode 3, Jean was such a brat. He was such a cowardly brat. And he was like that in this OVA, in both OVAs. Jean was really bratty. But you can see little glimmers. There's little glimmers there of his future potential. And I love Jean so much because of how much he's grown over the course of the series. They really play up his brattiness, especially in the first one. But I would argue that it's easy to forget that these are teenage kids. Like, these are teenagers. Like, Jean's what, 17 or 18? So yeah, he's still a kid, you know, even though he's taller than Eren and he's a little bit older, he's still got some immaturity to him, right? So I love the fact that Jean is an artist. Like, he can draw. And I think it's funny that the character he draws looks like Mikasa. It's like, oh. And I know a lot of people ship Marco and Jean, and my only response to that is, well, maybe Jean likes guys and girls. Maybe he doesn't have a preference. So I love that he draws, and he tries to hide the drawing from his mom. It's a very teenage thing to do. So it's funny because Ilse's Notebook was 3.5, which takes place in between these 2 OVAs. So it's good to know that while the events of these OVAs are happening, there's stuff happening with Levi's group over here. Like, it's cool to have that established in the timeline to kind of know what's happening, right? So this is 2 years, it's 2 years before the training, right? Is when it starts. And there's so many things. I wrote notes, so it's trying to read the notes. It's so insane because they do the training practice for the first OVA in Trost, which, when you think about it, that's, if Annie's part of the group at the time, Annie's learning the layout of Trost through these training exercises to know all the vantage points and where to transform and do all of that. So it's so intriguing, right? So very, very intriguing that Annie's a part of that. Interesting, very interesting to note. I like that Sasha says that there's no etiquette to hunting. That when you're hunting things, there's no prim and proper way to do it. You're just hunting food for survival. I think that's really cool. And it speaks a lot to Sasha's character. I like that Jean just calls her Potato Girl. That's really cool. Also, Sasha, again, reminding me that she is quite a lot like Hanji, even down to the woohoo. Like, Hanji does the woohoo as well. Like, they both kind of have like this free spirit, wild attitude to them that I really, really like. And then doing the hunting of the boar, you had the group of Sasha, Reiner, and Connie, which kind of makes sense. But then I find it so fascinating that it's Armin, Jean, and Annie in a group hunting. That's so cool to me, especially when you watch the whole season 1 and you see at the very end that it's Jean and Armin versus Annie in a lot of ways in this chess game that they're doing. It's so freaking cool. I'm curious why Reiner ran away from the boar. I'm like, I never associated Reiner with being a coward. Usually that's John's role. So the fact that Reiner ran away from the boar is interesting. But then Sasha just laying a smackdown, like that was hilarious. She's like, no. And then Aaron, there's the one scene, Aaron was not really present in most of the first OVA, which it was John's story. So it's funny because John and Aaron usually aren't pit up against each other because they're usually arguing, as we see in the second OVA. But in the one scene that we have Aaron and he's trying to lift a box, and Mikasa, of course, is having no trouble because girl is freaking ripped. Like, I like that several of you commented with the part 2 OVA where Mikasa has like the MMA gear on, like the boxing gear on, that they were like, oh yeah, that's from an extra that the mangaka did. And in Jean's OVA, she's in the gear. And so I was waiting for it. And yeah, girl's got abs for days. And is just totally ripped. And I love that it's like, what does that have to do with making an omelet? But we get it anyway. But of course, Aaron having to prove himself that he doesn't need Mikasa. Okay, show. Okay. I find it so interesting that Jean trying to push his mom away and being like, I'm not Jean Boy. I'm not Jean Boy, the problem child. I'm a ruthless man. Like trying to establish himself. And it was really sad when you think about it, because in the moment his mom's like trying to give him food and stuff and showing love and support for him, and Jean pushes her away, and Aaron gathers up all the stuff and he's like, you shouldn't be mean to your mom. And at first you're like, Aaron's telling him off, but then you're like, yeah, Aaron's lost his mom, so he probably doesn't think Jean's being respectful because he doesn't know what that feels like. And at the very end of the OVA, Jean realizes that his mother has loved him all this time and given him all these things, and he wants to do right by her, and so he makes the omelet, and then he decides he's gonna go see her. So it's like, oh, that's sweet. Pixis is interesting in this. I feel like they didn't have anything for Pixis to do except get drunk and want munchies. So that's what he does. He's like, let's just do this. And it went just straight up. I've only seen like an episode of Food Wars, and my brothers watched like all the season of Food Wars. My brother's really big into Food Wars, and I watched like one episode with him, and that's pretty much Pixis's reaction to the boar meat. That is an episode of Food Wars. Absolutely. It was so ridiculous. And I'm sorry, but was that whole thing... I'm glad I watched this again after season 1, because they all bit their hands and turned into titans, except Annie turned into like this angel, or was it Armin that turned into the angel? And then Jean is like one of the big-headed titans? What the heck? Crazy talk. And then the montage of just Pixis battling the titans. I'm like, if that's the only battle scene we ever get of Pixis, fine. I'm fine with it. Fine with it. But yeah, oh my gosh. But yeah, making the omelet. And of course, as soon as he started eating it and he finished it, I was like, oh, well, the omelet's gonna win. Because, and then they try to do like some philosophical bullshit where they're like, the meat is meat, but this was something homemade that had more heart. And it's like, okay. But I just... Jean being such a cowardly little brat in this episode, and at the end, like, slowly coming around and realizing his mom loved him. It's like, aw. It's like, aw, look at you, Jean. Slowly growing up. And then we get more of that in Distress. Now, Distress taking place after Ilse's notebook, but before episode 4. I think it's so cruel, knowing that this is a anime-only creation, that the show's creators decided it'd be real cute if we just had Marco and Thomas lead the groups, since they're going to die in an episode. Or at least Thomas will. I'm actually glad that I watched these OVAs, because for the longest time, and I don't know why, but for the longest time, I thought Reiner and Thomas looked similar. Like back in episode 3, I was like, man, it's kind of hard to tell Reiner and Thomas apart. But watching this OVA, no, there's a pretty distinct difference between Thomas and Reiner. Reiner's way more beefy and manly, and Thomas has a little bit more refined features. But yeah, so Marco taking the helm and leading with Connie, Sasha, Krista, Jean, the girl with the braids that dies like in episode 5, and Aaron. And then, what was her name? I have her name down here. Need to find it. What was her name? Because it's going to drive me crazy if I don't say what her name is. I've got my list of the dead. Mina. Mina died. There we go. So Mina. Yeah, and Aaron. And then the other group was Thomas and Mikasa and Reiner and Annie and Bertolt, and then the stupid guy that was really frightened. But the girl with the freckles, that we don't know her name, she was nowhere in the group that I saw. So that's interesting. I don't know if they just didn't animate her, if they're like, we have nothing to do with her. But she's usually always with Krista. So that's interesting. I'm curious. It's anime only, so I guess it doesn't matter. But I find that odd. And so there are some other things, too, that I'm assuming that the creators of the show kind of were privy to when they made this. And that was the idea of selling maneuver gear. To whom? It connects back to the military police selling gear to contacts. But who are the contacts? Like, what? I'm so curious going into season 2 if we will get more with, like, this underground black market and who's selling ODM gear. And the guy's making the comment that, well, you guys aren't going to do anything useful with it, so we might as well give it to the civilians. It's like, ooh. It's like, it's a bold statement, Cotton. So, of course, Aaron and John cannot get along. Like, they just argue so much. And they are pretty much antagonists to each other throughout most of this series. Even when John, like, is depending on Aaron and rooting for him, there's a little part of you that's like, John's still a little antagonistic. And, of course, Aaron is like, let me do it. Rely on me. And John's like, fine. I like that we get a little callback to Sasha's dad. Her talking about her dad teaching her how to hunt and how to find things and track things. Like, that's some really cool character development. And by the end of the series, by the end of the OVA, we actually have John and Aaron working together. And then, so I did want to establish, had Marco always had good hearing? Had that always been a thing that Marco was known for, was good hearing? Because with Mike, it's his nose. He can smell Titans. And Hanji, has the glasses and has good insight. And Mikasa has good intuition. But I was like, was Marco's strength always his sense of smell or sense of hearing? Was that always it, his sense of hearing? If that's the case, I'm curious how Annie, if Annie killed Marco as the female Titan, how she got the upper hand on him. Very curious indeed. But yeah, that was just him listening for the sounds, and maybe he was just chosen because he volunteered to do it. But if his secret ability is being able to hear good, if that's his quirk, then that raises a lot of questions about his death. But again, this is an anime-only OVA, so maybe they weren't thinking about that. So I also like the idea of the bandits being kind of having to move against society, not by choice, but for survival's sake. Like the bandit told Krista, he's like, I was involved in the last Titan attack, and I can't grow anything anymore because we've lost it's a wasteland now. We've lost all of our land. He's like, so I have to become a bandit to pay the bills. And my daughter warned me that this was going to happen. And it's like, oh. I like that Krista makes it to where Mikasa and Annie don't kill the two rat bandits, that they arrest them instead. Showing that Krista maybe has a little bit more compassion and empathy. But it's just establishing that a lot of these people going rogue isn't because they're bad people necessarily, but because they don't feel like they have a choice anymore. Which kind of ties back to Annie in this season. Is Annie a good person? Is Annie a bad person? She doesn't seem to think that she's a good person, but we don't know the circumstance behind why Annie's doing the things that she's doing. So is she kind of like these bandits and doesn't have a choice? It's like this for survival, So that's really curious. I'm wondering if that's kind of the case with her, if that's why she's doing the things that she's doing, because she doesn't have a choice. It's either become this female Titan, do whatever the job is, or suffer and die. And then Keith, old Keith, the leader of the training corps at the end there, I think that's his name, I think it's Keith. He's talking to Armin about taking the more difficult choice, which I think is interesting. Because he's like, if you're a soldier or you're a survivor, you know that, you have choices in front of you. You can take the more difficult choice or the easy choice. And often the more difficult choice is the more worthwhile one. But it kind of ties back, his words also kind of tie back to Levi's, where Levi's just make a choice that you'll least regret. And he's kind of saying something along a similar vein. He's kind of saying that the more difficult choice is often the more correct one, or the one that you will regret the least. So that's curious to think about in context of Aaron's choices back in episode 21, of Armin and his choice of facing the female Titan. Like, there's a lot of things to consider, but the idea that taking the more difficult route is often the better route is interesting. Very, very interesting. And then, of course, because this show likes to see us in pain and likes to see us suffer, we have Marco at the very end talking about what a great leader Jean would be. And it's like, you know what, show? I don't know what you want me to do at this point. You know, we've just like bawled our eyes out over Marco being gone and Aaron being like, I wouldn't want to be under Marco's lead. It's like, of course you wouldn't. But, oh man, these OVAs were really good. After the doom and gloom that has been this season and Elsie's Notebook, I needed some happiness. And nobody died. Nobody died in these OVAs. Let it be known. It's like the one episode or the 2 episodes of Attack on Titan, 2 in a row, where no one dies. I don't think we have one of those until the very end, right? Because if I'm looking at my death list here, and yeah, I guess towards the beginning, there were some episodes where no one died. But after that, it's pretty much like boom, boom, boom. And everybody's dead. Cool beans. I guess from episode 22 on, nobody died, which was great. Glad that we established that. Glad no one of importance died. Awesome, except a bunch of church people, but, you know. So yeah, these are really good. These 2 OVAs, I really enjoyed that. I needed a laugh. I didn't expect to get such a laugh from Attack on Titan, but here we are. But now that we've enjoyed these OVAs, next time we're going to watch No Regrets, which is Levi's backstory. I'm sure nothing bad will happen in those. I have a feeling that these are all in order now, I've realized. And so Elsie's Notebook is first, for whatever reason. Probably it's the most important. And then you have these 2. And I feel like they're just like, they sandwiched these 2 in there like, here's some brief happiness before we slather you in angst. It's like awesome. But yeah, that's what I'm watching next time is OVAs for No Regrets Part 1 and Part 2. So we'll talk about those. But in the meantime, I hope y'all enjoyed these reactions. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. As always, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to y'all again real soon with more Attack on Titan. Bye.